to another song breakdown. I'm Jonathan, and today we're going to be looking at the song In Christ Alone. The song originally was written in 2001 by Stuart, Townend, Keith Getty, and Kristyn Getty, but we're going to be looking at the 2013 arrangement done by the Passion Band, specifically Kristian Stanfill. That was, released in 2013. It has a little bit of a more modern take. Now, the original song, again, is not that old, it's 2001, but it has this feeling of a classic hymn. There's a lot of deep richness in it. There's a lot of textures in that song that kind of date it, almost. It's like another one of Stuart Townend's song, How Deep the Father's Love, which, even though it was written in like 93 or 95, feels like it was written in the 1800s or the 1700s. So it has this really unique hymn style to it. Now, the Passion version takes that hymn style and it adds a contemporary twist to it by putting these interludes in between the verses and by adding a chorus at the end that's very driving, very loud, very upbeat. It brings this contemporary music vibe to an otherwise classic hymn, pretty much. So we're going to be looking at that version. Now, other than just those structural things I just mentioned, there's only a couple real differences between the two songs. The original one is in the key of D, and that key actually works well for most congregations. And I'll even play the Kristian Stanfill version in the key of D because that works for most people. It's a little bit low for me, and so usually what I'll do is I'll have somebody else lead vocally, and I'll just come in and support with harmonies or other things like that. And so, we usually do it in the key of D. And again, that usually works pretty well. Renewing Worship recommends that as the key for congregations. But Kristian Stanfill, his arrangement is done in the key of F, which suits my voice more. But again, the most important thing is what can your congregation sing? Because if they can't follow you, then you're not leading them, you're performing for them. And those are two very different things. But play around with the capo, find what works well for your voice, but is still in the range of your congregation. Because you've got to be able to lead it, you've got to be able to sing it. So mess around with it, see which works best for you. So we have the couple structural things. We have the difference in key. The other thing that happens that's really a difference between the two songs is some of the harmonization is just a little bit different. It's a little bit simpler in the 2013 version than the 2001 version, but not by much. Most everything is played the same way, other than just the shifting of keys. Most everything's played the same way. There are just a couple areas where chords are simplified for kind of smoothing out those transitions to help for a guitarist. And so that's really it. If you can play one, you can play the other pretty much. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the chords that are used, some slight variations on those chords. We're going to look at a strumming pattern that will work well in this 3/4 time signature, and then we're going to break down the overall structure of this song. I have one little caveat about these chords before we jump into them. As I was looking at this song and just refreshing myself on this song, I noticed that Kristian Stanfill actually plays in C capo 5, which is F, but he uses C-shaped chords. So he uses these C-shaped chords, which are actually a little bit easier in some ways than the shapes that I tend to use, which is D capo 3. But you can choose what shapes you want to use. I'm going to be showing you D shapes, but I'll include a little cheat sheet underneath with what that would look like in the various keys or in various shapes, wherever you want to put that capo. It's another good reason to try different shapes is because if you got multiple guitarists, you want to be playing in different registers. So you might have somebody play without a capo using a full F chord and shapes around that F without a capo. You might have somebody a little bit higher up using D shapes, and somebody higher still using C shapes. And so it's good to have a variety of options, especially if you've got some different songs and you've got capos moving around all sorts of places. It's good to be able to work with that. So again, I'm going to be showing you D-shaped chords. I'm actually going to be showing you them without the capo on. If I have to sing, I'll put the capo on so it matches my voice a little bit better. But I'll be showing you without the capo, but I'll include a cheat sheet below if you need to put it in a different key. Alright, so let's zoom in and let's see these chords. Alright, like I said, I'm going to be showing you with D-shaped chords, and this song, as rich and as complex as it might seem, it's actually still just a 4-chord song. And so by that I mean it uses a 1 chord, a 4 chord, a 5 chord, and a minor 6. In the key of D, those chords are D as your 1, G as your 4, A as your 5, and B minor as your minor 6. So, those are your 4 chords: D, G, A, and B minor. 2 of those chords have variations. We'll start with this B minor, because it's the one that is used right off the bat. This B minor, during the interludes, is actually a B minor 7. And that's a very common thing that happens with our minor 6, our 6 minors, is that it becomes a minor 7. It goes from just a normal minor chord to a minor 7. So all that's happening is this B note is switching to an A. So it adds a little bit of flavor. The other one is this D chord. So there's a line in the verse where we have a walk up from a D to a G to an A, and so what happens is the bass line actually will change. So you get this F sharp note, G, and then A. And so when that happens, instead of playing just a normal D, we can actually do a D over F sharp to add that walking bass. Alright, now some people will play a D over F sharp with their thumb. They'll bring that over top, so you've got your normal D, bring that thumb around, and that's okay. But let me point something out to you. Watch my wrist here. So D, I'm kind of angling that wrist up. And when I do that, my hand grips closer around that string, or that neck, and I lose some mobility. I lose some flexibility there. And I'm also putting my wrist and my forearm at risk, because the way those tendons move is around the back and up and around. So this is the way they want to flow. You're pulling those, you're pushing those frets down, and so you want this nice continual flow. And when I bring my wrist up like that, I'm actually changing that direction. And so that can put a lot of strain up there. So what I tend to do is I will bring this middle finger up to this A note here, and bring the index finger up and around. And yeah, I mute that high E so that doesn't ring out. But I still get the chord across. I save my wrist in the long run, keep myself from some of those bad habits. Again, it's not wrong to do that, but it can just bring about some bad habits later on. And I still do that every now and again, just because of old habits. But I try to do this D over F sharp like this. Alright, so let's look at this strumming pattern. Now this song is in 3/4, so that tends to be a little bit more difficult for some people starting out. Because we typically do songs in 4/4, that works out pretty well. But this song is in 3/4, and so what we're going to do is we're going to combine a normal strumming pattern, a very common strumming pattern, this down, down, up, down, up, with a down, up at the end. So let me play through it a little bit so you can hear it, and then I'll explain it out a little bit more. Down, going to be a strumming pattern that can work throughout most of this song. Let me give you the ones and twos real quick too, because that's going to help us as we look at the verse. What I was just playing there is the interlude, which is every chord has a measure. Every chord lasts for a measure. So you do that full progression every chord. However, during the verses, each chord lasts for about half the measure. There's 3 beats in the measure, so that means you have one chord lasting 2 beats and another chord lasting 1 beat. And so it splits that strumming pattern in half, and you get a part of it goes with one chord, part of it goes with the other. So let me give you the ones and twos, and that's going to help with figuring out how to do this and changing chords. So it goes like this: 1 and a, E and a, 3 E and a, 1 E and a, 3 E and a, 1 and a, E and a, 3 E and a, 1 E and a, 3 E and a. So that's how it works. Now in the verses, what usually happens is you have the first chord lasting for beats 1 and 2, and you'll have the second chord on beat 3. So one chord gets the down, down, up, down, up, and then you switch down, up, down, up. So if I'm just looking at this first line, which is a D, B minor, A, D over F sharp, the D gets the first half of the measure, B minor gets the last beat, A gets 2 beats, D over F sharp gets 1 beat. So let me show you how that works. So, in Christ alone, my hope is found. He is my light, my strength, my song. Notice something that I changed up a little bit there, and that was with the A chord going to He is my light, my strength, my song, from through the fiercest drought and storm. So it changes up a little bit there. Instead of having the first chord last 2 beats and the second chord last 1 beat, it flips it around, and the first chord only lasts 1 beat, and the second chord lasts 2. And so that throws a little bit of a wrench in there. That's hard to switch with that strumming pattern. So what I tend to do is I will do 8th notes on the first chord. He is my light, my strength. He is my 1 and 2 and 1. And that D chord is the 1 of the next measure. He is my 1 and 2 and 1. And so I just hold it out when I get to that A chord and do a little down, up, bringing it back around to the next chord. And that really helps me out. It helps out with the timing of that transition. So that's where it differs there. But for the most part, you can keep this down, down, up, down, up, down, up. And that works out pretty well. The only other place where that is different is where it's kind of has a driving rhythm, and has it marked on a couple places in the song where we have this driving rhythm. One is on the second verse, which is actually the third verse of the original song. There in the ground his body lay, then bursting forth in glorious day, up from the grave he rose again. Drives there. So you're doing just kind of 8th notes. 1 and 2 and 3 and a 1 and 2 and 3 and adding some 16ths at the end. Same is true during the choruses. We're having a driving 8th note kind of a feel. So you're going to drive, but with the handful of chord progressions in this song, one of which I've already shared with you up to this point, is actually the interlude, and it's the main chord progression for the choruses at the end, and that is a measure of D, a measure of G, a measure of B minor 7, a measure of G. The chord progression that happens throughout a good bit of the song. Now, the other chord progressions happen during the verses, and it can seem like a lot to kind of look through, and even when I explain it, it might not seem as simple as it is, but there are ways to break this verse down to make sense of it. So what we've got here is we've got a couple chord progressions that happen. One, and this is, I'm just going to take it from the first line. So we have a G, so it's kind of coming in as you get this kind of a pickup off of the chord progression, the interlude. In Christ alone, my hope is found. So G to D, B minor A, that's one. G to D, B minor A, it's one chord progression. The next block is that walk up, where we have that different strumming pattern, that's slightly different. He is my light, my strength, my song. D over F sharp, G, A, D. He is my light, my strength, my song. So all together that line, G to D, B minor A, D, G to A, back to D. And it does that twice. This cornerstone, this solid ground, firm through the fiercest drought and the storm. Then we have one more chord progression that happens twice in this, and that's D over F sharp G, B minor A, D over F sharp G, B minor A. What heights of love, what depths of peace, when fears are stilled, when striving cease. Then it's back to that initial line. My G to D, B minor A, D to the G, A, then D. Alright. That last D there has a 2/4 time signature, so it's a little bit shorter. Alright, so here in the love of Christ I stand. Oh. And the reason it does that is to offset the beginning of the song, because it starts on the pickup of the previous measure. In Christ alone. So you have that oh, 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 in Christ alone. So you're starting off beat, you're not starting on the one in the first place. So that 2/4 at the end of the verse helps to kind of offset things again to complete that. So it's kind of weird how that works, but yeah. Here in the love of Christ I stand. Oh. So you kind of shorten that up a little bit. That's really the whole song. You have that interlude. The chorus has the D, G, B minor 7 to G, and then it has this one section that is different because it has this walking bass line, like I mentioned earlier. And so what it does is it goes from this D. I like to do an E minor 7 here. D over F sharp to the G. that's on the second half of that chorus. I give my life, I give my all, I sing this song to Christ alone. So it's really driving on that second half of that chorus, and so it changes up. How it's written isn't quite like that, but this kind of works for guitar. I'm not entirely sure what he does on guitar. It doesn't focus in on him when he's playing during that section, so I'm not sure what shapes he's using, but that works for me. It does have a walking bass line, so it is a little bit different in that, and so doing that there accomplishes that, going from a D to an E minor 7, D over F sharp, to a G. The only other thing I'll say about chords is this: when you're coming out of that chorus section, the "In Christ alone," and it does this chord progression again. In the original recording, or at least in the video of it, the live performance, it hangs on that D for eternity. So we don't need to do that. Find out how long you want to hold on to that D chord before going back into the little tagline, till he returns or calls me home. I like just to hold on to that D for 2 measures. So you go to the G. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, till he returns or calls me home. Here in the power of Christ. It goes to a B minor here, which is different because it's wanting to give a little bit of extra tension. I'll stand. It's a very common thing for your minor 6s. That's what you do. You put that minor 6 in. It draws it out a little bit longer. I'll stand here in the power of Christ. We stand. Ending on that D chord. Very, very pretty song. Very awesome song. Now, just potential options that you could do with this song. One, it's mostly piano driven, and so if you want to imitate any of that piano stuff, a little bit of finger picking never hurt anybody. A little bit of just kind of raking through. Kind of loosely picking through those chords. Never hurt anybody. Sounds really nice. Kind of fills that same kind of tinkering with the keys there that a pianist would do. It's very nice. Adds something to it. Another thing to think about is the original song has 4 verses. Okay, this song, because it adds this big chorus at the end, options to drop the second verse. In Christ alone, who took on flesh, fullness of God in helpless babe. That's a great verse. That's a great verse. This whole song really does, it is just going through the gospel. And so that second verse has a lot of good stuff in it. And it's so important to bring up. And so every now and again, if you're wanting to keep this concise to where you're just doing the 3 verses and the chorus at the end, maybe bring in that verse 2 every now and again. Switch it up a little bit. You can still do this whole song and not do the chorus at the end. I've done that. The chord progression is still very pretty. Having that interlude is still going to change things up a bit. And so that's a very helpful thing to do, to bring in that second verse, which has such good doctrine in there, good truth. Another thing to do is just using that chord progression and the closing chorus. You can throw that in anywhere. It starts off so good, and it's just a very simple 4-chord progression. It's only 3 chords actually, but you do the G twice. So you could be going in between songs. If you're in the key of F or whatever key you're in, you can modulate to it. Do that chord progression a little bit, and just hit that chorus and really drive with that. I could see so many uses for that, so many reasons to do that. You don't have to do the full song. Just add that chorus. There's so much there in and of itself. I find my strength, I find my hope, I find my help in Christ alone. When fear assails, when darkness falls, I find my peace in Christ alone. I give my life, I give my all, I sing this song to Christ alone. The King of Kings, Lord of all heaven sings to Christ alone. There's so much good stuff just in that section. So why not use that and tag it on to another song, or put it in between? Use that chord progression to give some breathing room, give people some time to meditate on it. So that's all for this song. I hope it helps out. This is a wonderful song to use. If you have any questions, anything you want me to go over a little bit more in detail, just let me know. Which key works well for you? What are some of your favorite stories with this song? What are some songs you'd like for me to do next? Would you like me to cover How Deep the Father's Love, another wonderful modern hymn? Let me know. Leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. See you on the next one.